Take your cocktails to the next level with crystal clear ice. I'm Brian Johnson, and in this episode of Better Cocktails at Home, we are making crystal clear ice. Now, it's really, if you get the cocktail, if you're at home and you use ice out of your ice maker or you use a cube tray, it's always got a cloudy section to it. Like around the edges, it might be kind of clear. It's always got a nice cloudy section, usually right in the middle of it. And that's because it's the last place to freeze. So we want to make clear ice at home. It's actually not quite as easy as you might think it should be. Ice really has really interesting chemistry going on, physical properties around the freezing point, and there's a lot of science to it, to be honest. And I think some of the science stuff is really interesting. I usually just look to people who really know that stuff and are into it and tell me what to do, because I like the end results, the practicality of doing it. But it's not too hard if you kind of go to use a method called directional freezing. Now, Camper English, he's a cocktail expert, cocktail writer. He's done a lot of research around ice and testing around making clear ice at home. And basically, the directional freezing method is one that really works pretty well, and it's really economical to do. So I want to show you how to go about making it at home. So you're going to need a freezer at your house, obviously, and you're going to need to clear a space. And what I use to make my ice freezing container, this is a 12-quart, just plastic Tupperware I got at Target. It was about $4.50. And you don't need the lid, but obviously it comes with one. But you need this, and I chose this one because the sides are relatively flexible and they give a little bit, because you don't want to have a rigid one. Some are hard plastic and very rigid. I would probably avoid those. So we need that. We also need an insulating material, because right now if we were to stick this in the freezer with water in it, it would start freezing from all directions, and we don't want that. We want to focus our directional freezing from one direction only, which is why we need this. This is this one happens to be a little like basically an air. It's kind of like a high-end bubble wrap basically. And I got this at Ace Hardware. They sell it for about $3.50 a foot. It ends up coming in a kind of a roll about this size. And so for making this, all you do is you basically put it on here, wrap it around. I wrapped it around twice, and this one's a bit long, but you want to measure it so it kind of hits the bottom of your container. Cut it off, tape it, and that's really how you get this. Very simple. And so once you have this, it's on there. So now we've basically got two sides that are exposed to freezing. Well, the sides are all insulated. I also cut a square that I put on the bottom of my freezer, which will sit on, and that will help insulate the bottom. So now we have insulation on all sides with freezing that'll be happening from the top only going down. So like this whole thing cost me, let's say about $8. And it took me about 5 minutes to make. And once you fill it with water, you put it in your freezer, and out comes about 24 hours later, approximately, is what I use for this one. It's going to vary depending on your thing. You're going to get clear ice. Why would you want clear ice? One, it's denser, so it melts slower. The other big thing is aesthetics. It just looks really cool in the glass. You can see through it, and it's just it does kind of take your cocktail to the next level. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put water in it, and I'm going to come back 24 hours later, and we're going to move on to the next part, is actually forming the clear ice into kind of chunky cubes. Now, this has been in the freezer for about 24 hours, and you're going to have to kind of gauge the time, do a couple tests to see how fast your container freezes if you're not using this very specific one. And once you've pulled it out of the freezer, you're going to want to let it sit on the counter. This one's been sitting about 15, 20 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes. And that's, one, helps it disengage from the edges of your container. and also does a process called tempering of the ice, makes it not quite as brittle. So once you've let it sit out, you can remove it from the foil container. And you want to do this over a bowl or over a sink. In this case, I'm using a bowl here, but you want to take it out because you do not want this to freeze solid. That's the whole point, is you want the bottom half should be liquid water, which is in this case. So you want to take it out. Sometimes it'll freeze, so it's literally all the water is totally contained. This time it didn't freeze exactly like that. So as you can see, it's just draining naturally. But the whole point of the directional freezing is so it doesn't freeze all the way. You don't want it to. That would be bad. All right, so with that, I use this as my ice chipper implementation. You can use, whatever gets the job done. You want to chip off the stuff that's not the solid part. And that'll just come off, no problem. You want to be kind of careful because ice can cut you and it is sharp. And just kind of round off the edges that are frozen. Kind of keep it into a little block. If you have a bowl or a sink, you catch all the stuff that flies. And that's pretty good. So let me move this out of the way. All right, so we have our block of ice here. And to show you how clear this is, you can actually read quotes and words and text through it. I mean, this is very clear. This is literally just tap water I've used. So, I didn't do any filtering. If you really wanted to get even more hardcore with your ice, you could probably use, you could try to lower the total dissolved solids with using a filter. And that could probably get it even clearer. But for my purpose, I like fast and easy, so tap water did the trick. Now, the next part is kind of what you want to do with it, right? So if you want to, start carving this as is and start chipping away at it and make some design, great. I think people frequently want to basically chunk it up into cubes. So I'm using a serrated bread knife here. You want to start scoring it. You don't do super deep. And then just put if you have a chisel on it, just kind of go through right to the crack. It should cleave pretty nicely. And then I usually will go do one more on this. Just to give you good cubes to work with. But you really end up with very clear ice. I mean, it's, you can see through it, you can read through it. It looks really cool. Besides aesthetics, why clear ice is really good to use is because it's solid. And so it actually melts slower, and you won't get quite as much dilution in your cocktail. Because the cloudy parts of ice do have, it's kind of like a aerated area where there's kind of concentrated air bubbles. So once you hit that, it starts melting faster. Whereas this, where it's basically totally solid frozen water, it's very solid, so it'll melt slower. And so it's can make your drink last a little bit longer. And it's not a hard process, obviously. I mean, you got to do a little bit of setup here. And you gotta, kind of let it sit in the freezer for a while and kind of get before you get the payoff. But I mean, it's not a hard process. These items here, I think I spent, about $4 to $4.50 on this thing, and I spent $3.50 to buy this insulating material. And water is obviously very cheap. So it's a fun project to try out, especially if we want to kind of really go after the aesthetics of cocktails and the presentation. It can really go a long ways. But I urge you to try it and let me know what you did, if you did anything differently, or if you tried some other things. I love to hear about it. And I also want to thank Camper English for his really good work with clear ice and documenting processes and the whole directional freezing method. I know he did a lot of work on that, so I urge you to go check his stuff out too. But that's how you make clear ice.